The Quinn mansion stood in silence, a silence so heavy it felt alive, pressing against the marble walls, echoing through hallways lined with portraits of ancestors who once smiled but now seemed to stare with disappointment. At the very heart of this vast house sat Elara Quinn, 16 years old, her delicate frame almost swallowed by the grand mahogany desk in front of her. Her fingers trembled over a piece of paper, the ink still fresh, the crimson letter F spread across it like a wound. To anyone else, it was a failure. To Elara, it was deliberate. Her mind was extraordinary. A photographic memory, the ability to devour entire textbooks in one sitting, to solve equations that baffled adults twice her age. But tonight, as she stared at yet another failed calculus test, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She had answered every question incorrectly on purpose. Why? Because brilliance, she believed, had cost her love. She remembered the moment with perfect clarity, the way all wounds carve themselves into memory. Months ago she had overheard her father, Alexander Quinn, speaking on the phone. A careless remark, but one that pierced her like glass. "Sometimes I wish she were normal, like other kids." Those words became her prison. So Elara began to bury her genius beneath a mountain of wrong answers and faked confusion. If she couldn't be the daughter who dazzled, maybe she could be the daughter who pleased. Her eyes blurred with tears as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Daddy." At that moment, the door creaked open. Alexander Quinn stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, yet somehow weary, carrying the weight of both his empire and his grief. Once, he had been the titan of Wall Street, a man who bent markets with a phone call. Now at 40, he was a widower clinging desperately to the only family he had left, a daughter slipping further and further away. His gaze fell on the test in front of her. Another failure. But his voice, it was gentle. "Another F, sweetheart?" To Elara, even that tenderness was laced with exhaustion. She thought she heard disappointment in the cracks of his tone, as if her very existence was wearing him down. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered, though her words carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Alexander crossed the room and knelt beside her, his expensive suit wrinkled, his tie loosening, yet none of that mattered. He wrapped his arms around her fragile frame. "Princess, talk to me. I know you're brilliant. I've seen it with my own eyes. You can solve problems most people can't even understand. Why are you doing this to yourself?" But how could she answer? How could she confess that her failures were acts of love, that she was sacrificing her light in exchange for something simple, something she craved more than applause, his unconditional pride? She lowered her head, unable to speak, and the silence stretched between them, thick, unbroken, and filled with every truth they were both too afraid to voice. In that silence, the mansion seemed to sigh. A lonely house, echoing with the ghosts of a wife long gone, a father who didn't know how to reach his daughter, and a girl too afraid to shine. As the night deepened and shadows grew long against the ornate walls, father and daughter sat together, two broken souls bound by love but separated by misunderstanding. Neither of them knew. In the quiet corners of their world, someone else had been watching, someone who saw Elara's hidden brilliance, someone who would soon step out of the shadows and change their lives forever. While the Quinn mansion drowned in silence, across town, another silence lived, one born not from wealth, but from survival. At Elmwood Academy, tucked away in the dim corridors where students rarely wandered, a woman wrung out her mop beneath the flickering light of a nearly forgotten basement. Her name was Celeste Hartman. To the world, she was invisible. A janitor, a shadow moving through the grand hallways with a cart of cleaning supplies, her presence acknowledged only when floors gleamed or trash bins overflowed. Students brushed past her without a second glance. Teachers nodded politely, then forgot her name the moment she turned her back. But inside that quiet exterior, Celeste carried a story few would believe. At 29, she was no ordinary custodian. She was a woman who once walked the halls of Harvard, her name stamped on research journals, her lectures filling classrooms where young scholars scribbled notes with awe. A doctor of educational psychology, specialized in the extraordinary brilliance and the extraordinary pain of gifted children. But life had not been kind. A grandmother's illness, medical bills that grew heavier than hope, a failed engagement that left her with debts she never created. Piece by piece, her promising future crumbled until all that remained was this uniform, this mop, and a paycheck that barely kept the lights on. Yet Celeste never resented the work, because even here, even in shadows, she had found her calling again, quietly observing children others overlooked. And one child in particular had caught her eye. Elara Quinn. For weeks, Celeste had noticed her. The way the girl's pen hovered over correct answers before deliberately choosing wrong ones. The flicker of brilliance that lit up her face during lectures, only to dim the moment a teacher called her name. The quiet agony in her shoulders every time an exam was returned with a scarlet F. Celeste saw it all, because once upon a time she had lived it herself. She remembered being a young girl with a mind too sharp for the small Tennessee town she called home. She had hidden her intelligence, softened her words, and masked her knowledge because brilliance, especially for someone like her, only invited loneliness. It was easier to pretend she was ordinary than to risk being feared for being different. And now, here was Elara, repeating the same tragedy. Celeste paused, leaning on her mop, staring at her reflection in the polished floor. Her own voice whispered back at her like a secret prayer. That child is killing herself slowly, and nobody sees it, because they're looking at grades, not souls. Her eyes closed, and for a long moment she listened to the hum of the empty hallway, the distant chatter of students too wrapped in their own worlds to notice the brilliance fading before them. She knew what she had to do. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It could cost her the one thing she had left, her job. Yet as she thought of the girl's downcast eyes, of the way her father's voice carried both love and exhaustion, Celeste's resolve hardened. Sometimes rules had to be broken. Sometimes saving a soul meant stepping into the light when you'd spent years hiding in shadows. That night, in her modest apartment with peeling paint and books stacked higher than furniture, Celeste sat at her kitchen table. A single lamp glowed against the darkness as she took out paper and pen. Her hand trembled at first, then steadied. She wrote not as a janitor, but as a woman who knew what it was to smother brilliance for the sake of acceptance. She wrote about light, about courage, about the tragedy of dimming one's fire just to make others comfortable. Her words flowed like a lifeline. You are not failing. You are not broken. You are hiding the gift the world needs most. Real love will never ask you to be less. Real love will only make you shine brighter. When the letter was finished, Celeste folded it with the precision of origami. No signature, no clue to its author, only words, sharp enough to cut chains, gentle enough to heal wounds. Tomorrow that letter would find its way into Elara's locker. And when it did, nothing in the Quinn household, or Celeste Hartman's life, would ever be the same again. The next morning at Elmwood Academy began like any other. Students filled the corridors with careless laughter, their sneakers squeaking against polished floors, conversations blending into a chorus of teenage noise. Teachers bustled, bells rang, and the world spun as usual. But for Elara Quinn, everything stopped the moment she opened her locker. There, resting atop her books, was a folded envelope. Not the careless scrawl of a friend's note, not the sharp edge of a teacher's warning. No, this was different. The paper was folded with precision, like a secret waiting to be unveiled. The handwriting across the front, delicate, graceful, already felt like a whisper. Her heart thudded as she unfolded it. The first words stole her breath. Dear, brilliant soul. Her eyes widened. That word, brilliant, A word she hadn't heard in months. A word she had buried, suffocated under her own sabotage. Her photographic memory drank in every loop, every curve of the letters as if they were carved into her soul. The letter spoke of hidden light, of a mind too rare to waste, of the tragedy of dimming one's fire just to feel loved. You are not failing. You are sacrificing your truth for affection, but real love would never ask you to be less. Her hands trembled. The words were so precise, so sharp, that they pierced the very wound she carried. Whoever had written this, they knew her, they saw her. The final line was both invitation and dare. If you are ready to stop breaking your own heart, meet me in the rose garden at lunch. Look for the woman who sees your worth, even when you cannot. Her breath caught. She read the letter again, and again. 7 times in total, though she hadn't needed to. Her mind stored every word effortlessly. For the first time in months, something stirred inside her chest, something dangerously close to hope. When the lunch bell rang, Elara found herself drawn to the rose garden. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of late blooms, the kind that clung stubbornly to life before winter's frost. She clutched the letter in her trembling hand as she stepped through the archway of roses. And there, beneath the old oak tree, sat a woman. Celeste Hartman. She had chosen her finest uniform that morning, though no uniform could disguise the elegance of her presence. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her posture calm, but her dark eyes revealed something else, a quiet intensity, a knowing that cut through disguises. Elara froze. You wrote this?" Her voice cracked, raw with disbelief. Celeste rose slowly, her movements graceful, deliberate. "I did," she said, her voice warm honey over steel. "And I meant every word." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. 2 souls, one desperate for truth, the other aching to give it. Elara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Why? Why would you care?" Celeste smiled softly, though there was sadness in her gaze. "Because I understand. I know what it feels like to be brilliant in a world that only feels comfortable when you hide it. I know the exhaustion of pretending to be less so others can feel more. I know the loneliness of carrying a mind that works differently." Elara's facade cracked. She had never spoken these truths aloud, yet here they were, mirrored perfectly by a stranger. How do you know?" Celeste reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Its pages, worn and filled with dense equations and theories, looked nothing like the scribbles of a janitor. She handed it to Elara. "This is who I am when no one is watching. I solve, I study, I push boundaries. But during the day," she glanced down at her uniform, "I clean floors, and let the world believe that's all I am." Elara's hands trembled as she flipped through the notebook. Her brilliant mind immediately recognized this sophistication. This was not ordinary. This was genius. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Celeste's gaze softened. "Because I see you making the same mistake I once made. You're dimming your light, not because the world can't handle it, but because you think your father can't. Every wrong answer you write is a piece of your soul you're throwing away, and I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself." The truth struck Elara like lightning, illuminating the corners of her heart she had kept hidden. Tears spilled over, sudden and unstoppable. Celeste drew her close, letting her sob into her shoulder. She didn't shush her, didn't rush her. She simply held her, steady and unyielding, until the storm passed. When Elara finally lifted her head, her voice was a whisper of fragile hope. "But what if he really does want me to be normal? What if he can't love me like this?" "Then we'll find out together," Celeste said firmly. "But first, you must remember who you are. You must stop sacrificing your brilliance on the altar of fear." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Yet for Elara Quinn, something new had begun. And high above, from the upper windows of the school, Alexander Quinn had arrived early for a meeting. He had seen it all. His daughter's tears, the stranger's embrace, the light slowly returning to Elara's face. For the first time in months, he saw a flicker of hope in her, and he knew he had to discover who this woman was. Autumn painted the city in shades of amber and gold, but on that Thursday evening the sky turned violent. Clouds gathered like restless giants, and rain fell in torrents that swallowed the world whole. At Elmwood Academy, the storm raged against ancient stone walls, transforming the courtyard into a stage for something fate had been carefully preparing. Alexander Quinn had come for a parent-teacher conference. He left the building late, elated by the glowing reports of his daughter's sudden transformation. "She's solving calculus again. He's alive in class." Every teacher had marveled at the shift, yet none could explain it. There was only one variable: the Rose Garden meetings, the mysterious woman. And now, as Alexander stood sheltered beneath the front portico, the storm revealed her. Through the sheets of rain, he saw Celeste Hartman rushing across the courtyard. But she wasn't running for herself. No, her eyes were fixed on a figure huddled beneath the old oak tree, drenched and trembling. Elara. Alexander's heart lurched. He started forward, but stopped. Something held him frozen. The sight of Celeste. She tore her own jacket from her shoulders, wrapping it around the shivering girl with a tenderness that pierced him to his core. She bent low, shielding Elara from the storm with her own body, guiding her carefully across the rain-slicked path. Then it happened. Elara stumbled. Before Alexander could move, Celeste caught her, arms steady, lifting her as though the storm itself could not touch them. In that instant, as lightning lit the sky, Alexander Quinn felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed since the day his wife died 3 years ago. He stepped out from the shelter into the downpour. His voice rose above the storm. "Miss, wait!" Celeste stopped. She turned, rain plastering her dark hair against her face. And in that moment, Alexander saw her fully for the first time. Even drenched, even in the plain uniform of a custodian, she was striking. But it wasn't beauty that stole his breath. It was depth. The intensity in her eyes, the intelligence sparking there, the compassion that radiated from her like fire in a frozen world. "Mr. Quinn," she said softly, her voice carrying both surprise and caution. "You're the one," Alexander breathed, his words nearly drowned by the rain. "You've been helping my daughter." Elara's face lit up with genuine joy, the kind Alexander hadn't seen in months. "Daddy, this is Celeste. She's been teaching me to remember who I am." Celeste finished quietly, her gaze never leaving his, reminding her she's brilliant. For a moment, the three of them stood there in the downpour, father, daughter, and the woman who had bridged a chasm between them. Practical necessity broke the spell. Alexander ushered them both toward his car, his protective instincts roaring. He insisted on driving them home. Inside the warmth of the Mercedes, rain still streaking the windows, he found his eyes drawn again and again to the rearview mirror. Celeste sat with perfect posture, hands folded neatly, but her gaze betrayed her. She absorbed everything: the leather seats, the city streets sliding by, the sound of Elara's animated chatter about a new chemistry project. She studied it all with a scholar's precision. Finally, Alexander spoke. "I don't even know your last name." "Hartman," she supplied simply. "Miss Hartman." His voice cracked with sincerity. "I don't know how to thank you. Elara's teachers say it's like she's a completely different student. You've given me back my daughter." "She was always this student," Celeste replied, her tone gentle but firm. "She just needed permission to stop hiding." The truth of it struck him like revelation. His daughter hadn't needed fixing. She had needed freedom. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. Her eyes followed the raindrops racing down the glass. "Sometimes. It takes one hidden thing to recognize another. Brilliance calls to brilliance, even when both are wrapped in disguise." There was weight in her words, a hint of secrets deeper than her uniform suggested. Alexander felt himself studying her more carefully, questions forming he could not yet ask. But one thing he did know. Gratitude demanded more than words. "Would you—" He stopped, hesitating. What was he doing? He barely knew her, yet something about her drew him like gravity. "Would I what, Mr. Quinn?" she asked softly. "Would you join us for dinner tonight? I'd like to thank you, Opally, for everything you've done for Elara." Celeste hesitated. Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite read. Uncertainty, perhaps fear. "I don't think that would be appropriate. You're just the woman who saved my daughter's soul," Alexander interrupted gently. His voice carried a weight he hadn't used in years. "That makes you the most important person in my world right now." Elara twisted around in her seat, eyes sparkling with hope. "Please, Celeste. Daddy makes the best lasagna. You have to come." Celeste looked from father to daughter, two faces lit with a rare joy. And in that fragile moment, her carefully built walls trembled. "I suppose, for a little while," she whispered. Alexander's smile broke through the storm like sunlight. Elara's cheer filled the car like music, and in Celeste's chest something dangerous fluttered, a feeling she had long since buried. That evening, over dinner, everything would change. But for now, it was enough. The Quinn mansion had stood in grandeur for over a century, but that night it seemed different. Not simply a monument of wealth, but alive, glowing with anticipation, as though the walls themselves sensed the arrival of someone who did not belong, yet somehow completed the picture. On the front steps, Celeste Hartman smoothed the simple black dress she had borrowed from the back of her closet. It was the finest thing she owned, modest and worn at the edges, and still it felt inadequate compared to the mansion's towering columns and glittering chandeliers she glimpsed through the windows. For a moment, she almost turned back. She didn't belong here. This was a world of privilege, marble floors and Persian rugs, while she was a woman of hidden debts and quiet scars. But before she could retreat, the door opened. Alexander Quinn stood there, his presence as commanding as ever, though tonight he looked different. No tailored suit, no Wall Street armor, just dark jeans and a cream sweater, his graying hair slightly tousled as though he had run his hands through it nervously. His blue eyes held something softer than usual, almost vulnerable. "Celeste," he said, her name rolling from his lips like it mattered. "Thank you for coming." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "Thank you for having me." Before another word could pass, footsteps thundered across the marble floors. Elara burst into the entryway, her face alight. "Celeste, you're here!" she squealed, nearly knocking her over with the force of her hug. "Come on, I have so much to show you. My chemistry set, my essay, everything." Alexander chuckled, rich and warm, a sound that filled the space like velvet. "Princess, let her breathe," he teased. "She's probably wondering what she's gotten herself into." Celeste smiled faintly as she stepped inside. The mansion was everything she had expected and more. Original artwork, glittering chandeliers, polished floors that reflected every light. Yet beneath the grandeur she felt something unexpected. Warmth. This wasn't a cold museum of wealth. This was a home. "My wife decorated much of this," Alexander said quietly as he noticed her taking it in. His voice dipped with the echo of grief. She had a gift for making big spaces feel intimate. Celeste's chest tightened with something tender. "She had beautiful taste," she replied softly. "It feels lived in, loved." The faint smile that touched Alexander's lips told her she had said the exact thing he needed to hear. The kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs, something rich simmering on the stove. Unlike the untouched kitchens of so many wealthy homes, this one was alive with use. Pots bubbling, pans clattering, counters sprinkled with flour. "I hope you like Italian," Alexander said, handing her a glass of wine. "Cooking helps me think, and today I had a lot to think about." Celeste raised a brow. What kind of thinking? He looked at her then, really looked, and the weight of his gaze made her pulse stumble. Thinking about miracles, he said softly, about angels who disguise themselves as janitors, about how sometimes the most important people walk into our lives when we least expect them. Heat rose in her cheeks. She lowered her eyes quickly. Mr. Quinn. Alexander, he corrected gently. Please, after what you've done for my daughter, we're beyond formalities. Dinner unfolded with surprising ease. Alexander was not the aloof billionaire she had expected. He was warm, attentive, drawing her into conversation with genuine interest. He asked about her childhood, her views on education, even her favorite books. And each time she answered, his focus never wavered, as though every word she spoke mattered. Elara, meanwhile, beamed with pride, showing off her improved grades, her latest chemistry experiments, her boundless energy. Celeste encouraged her, asking thoughtful questions, guiding her explanations when she stumbled. She listened with the attentiveness of a mentor, but loved with the heart of a mother. Alexander noticed it all. At one point, he leaned closer, his voice low. You're very good at that. At what? She asked. Teaching. The way you explain things, the way you listen. It's as if you've done this before. Celeste froze, her hands stilling on the glass. For the briefest moment, a flicker of truth threatened to surface. But then she smiled faintly, deflecting. I've always loved learning. I suppose it's natural to share it. But Alexander wasn't convinced. Something about her carried depths far beyond a janitor's uniform. Still, he didn't press. Instead, he watched as Elara demonstrated her homemade volcano, erupting with foam and laughter, and realized something breathtaking. This house hadn't felt this alive in years, not since before Catherine's death. When the evening finally waned and Elara reluctantly excused herself to tackle homework, Celeste stood to leave. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but sincere. For dinner, for everything. Celeste, Alexander said quickly, almost desperately, as he walked her to the door. Would you join us again? Tomorrow night, perhaps? She turned, her eyes flickering with conflict, longing, warring with caution. I don't think that would be wise, she murmured. We're from different worlds, Alexander. I don't belong here. You're wrong, he said quietly, stepping closer. You belong exactly here. With us. You've lit up this house in ways I thought were lost forever, and you make my daughter smile like she hasn't in months. That matters more than you know. Her breath caught. For one dangerous moment, the air between them charged with something unspoken, something both of them were too afraid to name. She whispered, One more dinner. And when she walked away into the night, Alexander Quinn stood in his doorway, his heart pounding with a truth he could no longer ignore. He was falling in love with the woman who had saved his daughter, even if he knew nothing about who she truly was. Within weeks, whispers spread through the corridors of Elmwood Academy. The girl who had once been the school's greatest disappointment, failing every test, retreating into silence, had returned with a brilliance that stunned even her teachers. Elara Quinn, once branded a failure, was now a storm of intellect. Her calculus professor, a stern man rarely impressed, stared in astonishment as she solved advanced equations with an elegance that made even graduate students falter. Her English essays bloomed into sharp, insightful analyses. In chemistry, she not only balanced equations, but explained the theories behind them to her classmates. It's like a switch has been flipped, one teacher whispered in the faculty lounge. She went from stumbling to soaring overnight. What they didn't know was that every day, beneath the roses in the school garden, Elara sat with Celeste Hartman, not as janitor and student, not even as mentor and pupil, but as kindred spirits. Celeste taught her not just formulas and theories, but how to trust her own mind again, how to let her light burn without fear. Elara laughed now. She smiled. She walked taller, and Alexander Quinn noticed. Each evening he would watch her across the dining table, his daughter's eyes bright as she eagerly recounted her lessons. She was different, alive, and though pride swelled in him, so did curiosity, because one truth was inescapable. The change began the moment Celeste entered their lives. October evenings fell crisp and golden, painting the city in fire. On one such evening, Alexander left a conference with Ilara's teachers, their voices still ringing in his ears. "She's remarkable. A different student entirely." Rain began to fall, sudden and furious. Sheets of water turned the world into watercolor. He hurried toward the car park, but paused under the school's portico, reluctant to leave. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was fate. Through the downpour, he saw them again. Ilara and Celeste, caught in the storm, huddled beneath the old oak tree. Celeste immediately shrugged off her own jacket, wrapping it around Ilara's shoulders, shielding her from the rain with her own body. Something stirred in Alexander's chest, something he thought had died with Catherine. Love, or the first trembling shadow of it. Later that night, as he served dinner, he watched Celeste with a new awareness. She sat at his table with quiet dignity, her hands folded neatly, but her eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, drank in every detail around her. She didn't merely exist in a room, she studied it, absorbed it, as though she were cataloguing the world itself. Ilara chattered about a new chemistry project, and Celeste leaned in with genuine excitement. She wasn't just polite. She was invested, her mind dancing alongside Ilara's. Alexander found himself mesmerized. "Miss Hartman," he said softly, "how did you know? How did you see what the rest of us missed?" Celeste glanced at him, her gaze flickering like candlelight. "Because brilliance calls to brilliance," she murmured, "even when both are hidden." There was something in her tone, a weight of truth left unspoken. Alexander felt it, heavy and real, pressing against the silence between them. That weekend, as the city's skyline glittered against a dark sky, Alexander invited them both to a rooftop restaurant. The night air was crisp, the stars scattered like jewels above. Ilara laughed easily, enjoying her father's rare lightness, her eyes darting often to Celeste as though drawing strength from her presence. But Alexander's gaze lingered on Celeste, the way candlelight softened her features, the way her laughter was quiet but sincere, the way she looked at Ilara as if she were her own. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the dangerous pull of possibility. When Ilara excused herself to the restroom, the silence between Alexander and Celeste thickened. He leaned closer, voice low. "You've given me back my daughter." Her dark eyes met his. She only needed permission to be herself. "And you," he said softly, almost reverently, "were the only one who could give her that." For a fleeting moment, their gazes locked, and the world seemed to tilt. Something fragile, something breathtaking, sparked between them. But then Ilara returned, and the spell was broken. Still, as they left that rooftop under the blanket of starlight, Alexander Quinn knew the truth he had been denying. He was falling in love with Celeste Hartman, and he was certain she was hiding something from him. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of dinners that stretched into laughter. 3 weeks of secrets carefully guarded behind Celeste Hartman's steady eyes. 3 weeks of Alexander Quinn feeling alive for the first time in years. And then the letter came. It arrived on a Seatown crisp Tuesday morning, sealed with crimson, stamped with the crest of Harvard University. The envelope was thick, official, whispering of futures carved in ivy and stone. Alexander found it waiting on the doorstep beside the morning paper. His hands trembled as he held it, his heart pounding with both pride and dread. "Ilara," he called up the stairs, voice thick, "there's something here for you." She appeared at the landing in pajamas, hair tied messily, still half asleep. But when her eyes fell on the envelope, she froze. "Is that—" "Yes," Alexander whispered, handing it to her with reverence. They sat together on the living room couch, golden sunlight flooding through tall windows, the envelope trembling between them like a sacred relic. "Should I call Celeste?" Elara asked suddenly. Alexander hesitated. "She should be here for this," his daughter insisted. "I won't open it without her. She's family." The word pierced him. Family. That was what Celeste had become, seamlessly, silently. He didn't argue. He dialed her number. Her voice answered, soft, cautious. "Alexander?" The letter came. "Elara won't open it without you." There was silence, then a sharp breath. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 18, still in her custodial uniform, her hair pinned back, but her eyes shining with pride and nerves. Elara ran into her arms, clutching her tightly. And then, together, the three of them gathered around the envelope. Elara slit the seal carefully, her hands trembling. She unfolded the letter and read. At first her face went pale. Then her lips parted, breath caught. She lowered the letter into her lap, speechless. "What is it?" Alexander demanded, fear rising in his chest. "Princess, what does it say?" Wordless, she handed it to him. He read aloud. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into Harvard University with the highest entrance exam scores in our institution's 387-year history." The words blurred, his vision swam. "You got in," he whispered. "Not just in. You broke their record." Elara's eyes brimmed with tears. Celeste pulled her close, whispering, "I told you, the world would see your brilliance." Alexander looked at Celeste then, gratitude overflowing, love nearly spilling from his chest. But before he could speak, Celeste's expression shifted. Something heavy entered her gaze. "There's something I need to tell you both," she said quietly. The joy in the room faltered, dimmed. She stood, moved to the window, her back tense. The sunlight fell across her like a spotlight, illuminating the very truth she had hidden for weeks. "I haven't been completely honest," she began, "about who I am." Alexander's heart clenched. "I told you I understood what Elara was going through, that I'd lived it myself. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." She reached into her bag, pulled out a worn book, and handed it to Elara. Elara's eyes widened. "The Secret Garden of Dreams," she breathed. "This is one of my favorite books. I've had it since I was a child." "Look at the author," Celeste whispered. Elara's eyes dropped to the cover. Her mouth fell open. S.R. Hartman. "My pen name," Celeste said softly. "Serafina Rose Hartman. I wrote that book. I wrote the entire series. I have a PhD in educational psychology. I've worked with gifted children my whole life, and when I saw you, Elara, I knew exactly what was happening." The room fell silent. Alexander's chest tightened with something sharp. Betrayal, confusion, awe. "So all this time," he rasped, "you weren't just a janitor?" Celeste's voice broke. "No, life broke me. My grandmother's illness, medical bills, debts left behind by someone I trusted. I lost everything. This job was survival. But even here I could still help children. I could still be who I was meant to be." Elara's face crumpled, her voice small. "So, was I just a case study to you?" Celeste dropped to her knees Bikiki. For her. "No. God, no. You were never a project. Every word, every moment, it was real. You are more than a student to me, Elara. You're family." Alexander stood abruptly, pacing, his jaw tight. "You deceived us. For weeks you let me believe you were someone else. You let me—" His voice cracked. "You let me fall in love with a woman who doesn't even exist." Celeste flinched, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I exist. The woman who held your daughter when she cried. The woman who laughed at your table. The woman who loves you both. She is real. I only hid my past because I wanted to be seen for me, not for my titles." But Alexander's eyes were cold, wounded. "You should have trusted us." Elara's sobs broke the silence. Stop, both of you. She saved me when no one else could. She made us whole again. Does it matter what degrees she has? She loves us. But the damage was done. The air hung heavy with betrayal. Finally, Celeste stood. Her shoulders slumped with defeat. I understand. I'll go. At the door she turned one last time, her voice breaking. Congratulations, Elara. You deserve every dream waiting for you. And Alexander, I'm sorry. For everything. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving behind silence. Elara's sobs echoed through the mansion. Alexander sank onto the couch, head in his hands, the Harvard letter crumpled in his grip. The day that should have been their greatest triumph had shattered into heartbreak, and the love he had just begun to believe in now felt like a betrayal too heavy to bear. The Quinn mansion had never felt so cold. The chandeliers still glittered, the fire still burned in the marble hearth. Dinner was still served on polished silver, yet none of it mattered because the seat across from Elara Quinn sat empty. The chair where Celeste Hartman once smiled, the chair where laughter used to echo, now silence. Tea. 3 days had passed since Celeste left, and in those days the mansion had returned to its old rhythm, sterile, orderly, lifeless. Elara pushed her food around her plate, appetite gone. She barely looked up at her father. Alexander Quinn pretended to eat, but every bite tasted like ash. He had tried to bury himself in work, in numbers, in the empire he built, but nothing dulled the ache in his chest. He had lost her, not just Celeste, but Elara's light too. His daughter's laughter had vanished with her. That night, Elara stood at the window of her bedroom, clutching the Harvard acceptance letter in her hands. The words on the page that once filled her with pride now felt like a chain. She whispered into the night, "What's the point, if she isn't here to see it?" Her photographic memory tortured her. Every detail of Celeste's voice, every warmth of her embrace, every truth she had spoken. The garden felt empty now. The house felt hollow. Finally, she could no longer bear it. She stormed into her father's study, eyes blazing with fury. "You let her leave!" Alexander looked up from his desk, startled. "Elara, you let her leave!" she screamed, slamming the letter down. "Do you even understand what she did for me? I was dying, Daddy, dying inside, and she saved me. She gave me back my life, my mind, my hope, and you—" Her voice cracked, tears spilling. "You threw her away because of your pride." Her words sliced through him like knives. Alexander rose slowly, his jaw tight. "She lied to us," he said, his voice low. "She deceived us both. How could I trust her when everything she told us was a half-truth?" Elara's fists trembled. "She didn't lie about the things that mattered. She didn't lie when she held me while I cried. She didn't lie when she taught me to love myself again. She didn't lie when she looked at us like we were her world." Alexander flinched. The memory of Celeste's eyes, shimmering with both love and sorrow, seared him. "Daddy," Elara's voice broke into a whisper. "Don't you see? You've already lost Mom. If you let Cel—" "Yes, go too. You'll lose me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alexander's chest rose and fell heavily, his face etched with torment. "Elara," he whispered, "I don't want to lose you." "Then find her," she demanded, her green eyes fierce through the tears. "Find her and make it right, because I can't do this again. I can't go back to pretending I'm fine when I'm not. She's not just some stranger, she's family, and you know it." Her voice cracked on the last word, but her conviction held steady. Then she turned and fled, slamming the door behind her, leaving Alexander alone in his study. That night, sleep abandoned him. He sat by the fire long after midnight, staring into the flames, hearing Celeste's voice in every crackle of the wood. "Brilliance calls to brilliance, even when both are hidden. You belong exactly here, with us." Her words echoed, haunting, until his heart could no longer deny the truth. He had been a coward. He had let fear and pride blind him. He had driven away the woman who had brought life back into his home, the woman who loved his daughter as her own, and who had awakened something in him he thought was gone forever. Alexander Quinn rose from his chair, resolve hardening. He would find Celeste Hartman, and this time he would not let her go. The morning after Elara's confrontation, Alexander Quinn sat in his office, but the spreadsheets and contracts blurred into meaningless ink. Numbers no longer mattered. What mattered was the hollow echo of his daughter's words. She's not just some stranger. She's family. And you know it. His pride had cost him too much already. He had lost Catherine to illness, and now, if he wasn't careful, he would lose Elara, and Celeste too. For the first time in years, Alexander closed his laptop mid-meeting and walked out. His assistant stared, stunned, but he didn't care. His empire could wait, his heart could not. He was going to find her. Celeste Hartman was not easy to trace. She lived quietly, deliberately hidden from the world's eyes, but Alexander Quinn had built fortunes on finding answers others could not. He began at Elmwood Academy. The headmistress looked startled when he appeared in her office, raincoat still dripping. "Mr. Quinn, what an unexpected visit." "I'm looking for Celeste Hartman," he said firmly. "Your custodian." The headmistress frowned. "Miss Hartman handed in her resignation yesterday. No notice, no explanation." Alexander's pulse quickened. "Do you have a forwarding address?" The headmistress hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Between us, I always knew she was overqualified for this job. I looked into her file once. She has a doctorate from Harvard. Her transcripts, her published work. Remarkable. I never understood why she was here." Alexander swallowed hard, his suspicions confirmed. "Please," he said softly, "if you have any record of her address." She slid him a card, reluctant but moved by the urgency in his voice. That evening, Alexander stood before a crumbling brick apartment building on the edge of the city, a far cry from the marble halls of the Quinn estate. Its paint peeled, its stairwell reeked faintly of damp. Apartment 3B. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door creaked open. Celeste stood there, her eyes rimmed red, her frame wrapped in a cardigan far too thin for the November chill. The sight of him stole her breath. "Alexander." Her voice cracked his name. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain pattered against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. "I shouldn't have come," he began, voice rough. "But I had to." She turned away, leaving the door half open, retreating into the dim apartment. He stepped inside. The space stunned him, not because of luxury. There was none. The furniture was sparse, second-hand. Wallpaper peeled in corners, yet books towered on every surface, papers scattered with dense formulas, sketches of theories pinned to the walls. It was the mind of a scholar disguised as a ghost of a home. Celeste clutched a stack of unpaid bills, trying to hide them as he entered. But Alexander saw. "My God," he whispered. "You were living like this?" Her voice was brittle. "It's enough." "No," he said firmly. "It's survival, not living." Her eyes flashed, defensive. "I don't need pity." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "This isn't pity, Celeste. It's realization. You've been carrying the weight of brilliance and heartbreak alone, and his voice cracked. "I was blind." She shook her head, tears spilling. "You weren't blind. You just didn't want to see me, not really, not as I am. You wanted the miracle, not the broken woman behind it." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "Celeste." His chest tightened. "I was wrong to let you go. I let pride win. I let fear win. But Elara, she needs you. I need you." Her breath caught, her guard faltering. "Alexander." He stepped closer, desperate. "Come home with me, please. For Elara. For us." Her eyes shimmered, torn between longing and fear. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. but wounds ran deep. "Words aren't enough," she whispered. "If you want me in your life, prove it." Alexander's jaw tightened with resolve. "I will." And in that broken apartment, among stacks of brilliance and shadows of debt, a promise was born. Alexander Quinn would not only fight for Celeste Hartman's place in his world, he would fight for her dignity, her dreams, her future. Because for the first time since Catherine's death, he had found someone worth fighting for. The days after Alexander's visit to that crumbling apartment became a test of resolve. He had promised Celeste Hartman he would prove his words. And Alexander Quinn was not a man who broke promises. But how do you prove love to someone who has lost everything? He began with small steps. Every morning, Elara insisted on visiting the rose garden at school, hoping Celeste might return. When she didn't, Alexander drove her to the apartment building. They never pushed, never knocked more than once, but Elara always slipped a folded note beneath the door. "I miss you. My chemistry teacher says I'm the best in class now, thanks to you. Please come back." Celeste never replied, but Alexander noticed the notes were always gone the next day. Meanwhile, Alexander used the resources of a billionaire not to control, but to lift. Through a discreet foundation, he arranged for Celeste's grandmother's hospital bills, the debts that had dragged her into ruin, to be cleared in full. He never mentioned it. He wanted no gratitude, only for her to breathe again. He also reached out to old colleagues at Harvard, retrieving Celeste's abandoned academic manuscripts. One by one, he sent them for publication, her research resurfacing under her own name, reminding the world of her brilliance. When she discovered it weeks later, her phone buzzing with congratulatory emails, she wept alone in her apartment, clutching the screen as if it were a lifeline. And she knew who had done it. But Alexander didn't stop there. One evening, he arrived at her apartment with something unexpected. Not roses, not gifts, but Elara herself, holding a box of Celeste's favorite takeout. "Movie night," Elara declared, brushing past Celeste as if she had never left. She set up blankets on the worn couch, chattering about chemistry experiments and dorm shopping lists. Celeste stood frozen at the door, her heart breaking and mending all at once. Alexander remained in the doorway, quiet, respectful. "She insisted," he said softly. "I only drove her." And so they sat, the three of them, on that old couch, eating noodles from cartons, watching a film with grainy sound. It wasn't the Quinn mansion, it wasn't marble and chandeliers, but it felt like family. For the first time since she left, Celeste laughed, a real laugh, unguarded, spilling from her chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Alexander watched her, his heart aching with reverence. He didn't touch her, didn't push. He only let the moment breathe. Afterward, as Elara dozed against Celeste's shoulder, Alexander finally spoke. "You once told me that brilliance calls to brilliance, that you saw Elara because you lived it yourself." Celeste's dark eyes lifted to his. "I did." "Then let me say this plainly." His voice shook with conviction. "I don't want the world to have you only as a ghost behind research papers. I don't want my daughter to know you only as a fleeting miracle. And I don't want to love you from a distance. I want you here, with us, as you are. No masks, no hiding." Celeste's breath trembled. Tears shimmered in her lashes. "And what happens when the world judges? When you're bored, your clients, your so-called friends whisper that you've let a broken woman into your perfect empire? Then let them whisper," Alexander said fiercely, "because they'll be right. I have let a broken woman into my empire, but what they won't understand is, she's the one who made it whole again." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, too heavy to dismiss. Celeste looked away, overwhelmed. Her defenses still clung stubbornly, but her heart betrayed her, pounding with hope she had long buried. Elara stirred then, murmuring in her sleep, "Don't leave again, Celeste. Please." Celeste pressed a trembling kiss to her hair, her tears falling silently. And in that fragile silence, Alexander Quinn knew he was closer than ever. He had not won her back yet, but the walls around her heart were crumbling, and he would not stop until they were gone.